Thank you for joining me here today. We are gathered on Treaty 6 territory, and I acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share a deep connection and history with this land. Over and over again, the UCP has failed to help Albertans with rising utility costs. They ignore the problem of skyrocketing bills for months. In fact, they said that no help would be coming and that the market was working, only to reverse course, then promise one rebate that turned out to be fake and another with no timeline. They have dithered, reversed themselves, blamed others, and wasted time. And now they're saying it will take several more months before any support is provided to Albertans. A bill similar to Bill 22 was introduced last fall, only to be abandoned with no explanation. It wasn't passed before the end of session and died on the order paper. Now, they've reintroduced a similar bill almost 6 months later. We're still reviewing the bill and may have more to say about it, but it appears to be substantially similar. As a result, we've lost almost 6 months in taking steps to modernize our grid and add energy storage that could reduce costs in the long term. We support adding more energy storage to the grid, and we have been consulting on ways we can add more storage through our Alberta's Future project and on ways we can achieve a net zero grid by 2035 while creating 60,000 jobs. But the UCP keeps failing Albertans. They failed to get direct supports out the door that could help Alberta families with skyrocketing utility bills. Now they've delayed making simple changes to the grid that could actually provide long-term relief for Albertans with utility costs. Simply put, the UCP can't be trusted to manage our electricity grid or to protect our pocketbooks. Thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
All right, thank you, Kathleen. Just a reminder for those joining us on Zoom to use the raise hand function, and for those joining us on the phones to use the *9 function to get into the question queue. First, we will start with any questions in the room. With no questions in the room, we'll go to the phones. Our first question comes from Janet French from CBC. Go ahead, Janet.
Excuse me. I was interested in what you said about wanting a net zero grid by 2035. So the minister said today that there is no specific target under his government to have any proportion of the electricity in Alberta generated from renewable sources. And I assume that applies to any sort of climate targets for emissions applied to the sector. How do you think it's fair for him to say then that this legislation will lead to decarbonization of the electrical industry in Alberta?
I think that the addition of storage to the grid, and this legislation is necessary to enable that. So I think that the addition of storage to the grid is absolutely necessary in order to create decarbonization of the grid. I mean, it's obviously our view that under an NDP government, we would be aiming to achieve net zero in the electricity grid by 2035. I think that's a commitment that is in line with both our climate targets and our targets in terms of creating jobs. So, I mean, I appreciate what the minister is saying. It will lead to decarbonization, but if you want to make real progress on issues, you need to set targets and then measure your results.
Do you have a follow-up, Janet?
Yeah, I'm thinking about this idea that self-generators can now buy electricity cheaply and sell it for more money. That doesn't sound like it's very good for consumers. What do you think about that?
So my understanding in terms of what's going on here is that they're allowing the AESO to come up with a tariff to make self-supply and export, to allow the AESO to put a tariff on self-supply and export. So currently, if you're doing something like that, you're not paying to connect to the grid. And so this would allow them to pay to connect to the grid. I think that's probably a good thing. In terms of what you're suggesting is that they're going to use self-supply and export essentially as an arbitrage sort of a thing. I have certainly, I mean, we've heard different things from different folks in terms of that. I'd be interested to know more in terms of what's being said about that.
Do you have anything further, Janet?
I'm good, thanks.
All right, we will do another round for questions. Just a reminder for those to use raise hand, and for those on the phones to use the *9 function. With no further questions, we'll wrap today. Thanks, folks.
Well, I'm going to just ask you, you got money for all this last week with the balancing pool. Did you want to respond to that? The ECP basically said this is all your guys' fault because of the balancing pool.
I mean, yeah, it was a pretty absurd justification on their part. The report that they had was not new information. It was information that, in fact, the report itself had been in their hands for over a year. The truth is that they have failed to do anything to help or protect Alberta consumers from skyrocketing prices, and so they're basically trying to throw out weak justifications on that.
And if they went with the bill you guys proposed, would it get dollars in taxpayers' pockets faster?
The amendments we proposed to their rebate bill?
Tell me if I'm wrong. You had a bill for electricity rebates a while ago. You would have got the money out a lot quicker, correct?
Yeah, so we had proposed a bill that we drafted and attempted to share with the government to prevent people from being disconnected while they waited for the money to come out the door. The government has put through now their bill for rebates. We proposed several amendments that would have put timelines on it. So they would have had to have the money in the hands of Albertans by the 31st of May. The UCP rejected all of those amendments, and they said that they can't get them out before June or even July.
I will just do one last pass for questions. Just a reminder for those on Zoom to use raise hand, and for those on the phones to use *9. All right. Actually done today. Thank you, folks, for joining.
Thanks so much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.